Missionary Training Centers, or MTC, might just be one of the most cult-like environments on Earth.
I never had a choice. It's because you never had a spine.
Or Missionary Tickle Center. It's like a big Montessori school with a bunch of dye-free toys and free-range teenagers that could just go and do whatever they want.
And now it's time to consider the path of your feet, for crying out loud.
Today, we are considering the path of a very confused young man. Let's turn it over to this gentleman who seems to be broadcasting from inside a storage closet at a dental office, and see what he has to say.
Missionary Training Centers, or MTC, might just be one of the most cult-like environments on Earth. Inside, young men and women are bombarded with religious indoctrination from morning till night. Isolated from the outside world, no leaving, few phone calls, and only the occasional email. Criticism? Not tolerated. It's a high-control environment, where shame and fear are wielded as tools to keep everyone in line. Missionaries are denied any personal time, constantly under surveillance, with the exception of a few moments alone in the bathroom. Far from being nurturing or supportive, the MTC is designed to strip away critical thinking, personal freedoms, and one's entire identity.
He had some really awesome upbeat music. It was like some angry music that you would hear maybe from like a Russian techno party or something like that. You know, it had all the angry vibes. And then he showed this completely furious phase of Elder Gong, which, if you're going to show an apostle that when you're saying like they rule by fear and shame, like you should have showed Holland of any of them,
or Oaks,
or Oaks. Yeah, I mean those are the two that can strike fear into anybody. But like Elder Gong, he is like super chill, really even keeled, really nice. Anyway, what are some of your initial reactions?
First of all, his chair does look like a dental chair. I will give you that. I did notice that at the very beginning. So maybe, two birds, one stone, get your cavities filled and hate the church at the same time. Cool.
Well, if there is one thing that you see on every corner in Utah, it is an LDS chapel. And right next to it, it's a dentist's office. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, the odds play out in favor of this one. So, no, I think that some of the things that like were funny to me is that he says that they're kept in isolation, and then he shows Provo, the MTC smack dab in the middle of Provo.
Yeah,
you can go running around Provo, but it's what you agreed to do is to come to these buildings and learn. And you actually have to fill out a quite rigorous application to become a missionary. So if you're not consenting throughout the entire process, it's kind of a you problem.
So wait. Are you telling me that parents aren't grabbing their kids and throwing them into the MTC against their will, saying like, "Mom, no, please, let me stay home.
Kicking and screaming.
I don't want to do this."
Yeah, I mean, and so sure, like your parents really want you to go. There's some pressure there. Yeah, but you still have to choose to do it. Like this whole whiny mentality of like, I never had a choice. Because you never had a spine. You need to have a spine to make choices, and you can't just like blame the world for you being spineless. If you don't want to go on a mission, don't go on a mission. If you want to, but you're not sure, if you want to go on a mission, then great. That's a great place to start. And if you want to go on a mission and you believe and you have a testimony, perfect. Go to the MTC. They'll teach you everything you need to know. They'll feed you. They'll give you everything you need so you don't have to leave the campus. It's actually a pretty sweet deal. I had a great time at the MTC. It was a fun time. It went a little long, but that's because French is hard. It was hard to pick up for me. People who try to paint the MTC as this indoctrination camp. First of all, newsflash, your info is messed up. They're already indoctrinated by your standards by the time they get to the MTC.
He did say they're being brainwashed. It's like, no, if they were brainwashed, it has already happened at that point.
Yeah, those brains are squeaky clean by the time they get to the MTC. Let me tell you. So yeah. If that's the argument, it doesn't work because that's not what it's there for. It's there to teach you a language, and it's there to teach you how to teach. They do both of those things very well at the MTC. There are different programs around the world that come to study how language is taught at the MTC because they do such a proficient job. The MTC is a great place to bolster your spirit. You can feel strength and unity and solidarity with those people who believe the same thing you do. And every time somebody sees everyone enjoying the same belief system, it just automatically appears to be a cult for some reason.
Well, I think it's important to call out the language. So MTC, what does that stand for? Missionary Training Center. So it's a place for training. That's right. This guy seems believe that MTC stood for Missionary Tickle Center. It's like a big Montessori school with a bunch of dye-free toys and free-range teenagers that could just go and do whatever they want as they eat their organic applesauce pouches and do finger painting all day. I'm not sure what his idea was. This is like boot camp for your mission. So I think this is a good question to explore. What do you think your mission would have been like without an MTC experience?
For starters, I wouldn't have spoken French. Like, it just wouldn't have happened, you know?
Right.
Like, you know, and I learned most of my French on my mission, but, you know, those initial 6 weeks is like, oh, I need to get this in gear.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was really, you know, helpful because it helps you set expectations for what teaching actually looks like in the field. I never had a lesson go actually as we role played it in the MTC. That's not, it's never going to resemble what you do there exactly, but the practice and the repetition and the faith building that happens in the MTC is the most important part. It provides a filtration system for those elders who thought that they were ready and realize that they're not, which is great. It gives them a chance to to fix things before they get actually out into the mission field. And it gives you a chance to address questions that you might not have asked yet about the gospel. If you missed a gospel principle growing up that you weren't feeling super strong about, you could pray and learn about it in the MTC, which was amazing. So I feel like on the other hand too, not a lot of people had a lot of experience just bearing their testimonies, just saying what they believe. And that happens all the time in the MTC. So I think that, you know, all those things need to happen. You need to practice all of those things before you actually get out in front of a real family who's asking you what happens when we die. You know, or where did we come from before this life? You need to be well rehearsed in those before you get in front of them, so you can actually be an effective teacher. You're not gonna do a good job unless you practice. And you know, what better place to do it than the MTC?
I don't know if it's different from when I was there. It probably is, but when I was there, like the average day, we didn't actually have that much time of instruction. Like there wasn't actually that much time where other people came and taught us and teachers came in. Obviously, like we did have like maybe 3 hours a day where somebody would come in, they would teach us Spanish. Somebody else would come in and they would teach us about, you know, gospel principles, and they would teach us about testifying and all of that. And then somebody else would come in and teach us about like role playing and how to teach and how to train and all of that. But the rest of the time was literally just sitting in a quiet room studying the gospel. It was actually a learning center where we were reading scriptures, we were studying the language, and we were trying to figure it all out, which happens pretty much autonomously. Because like you didn't have to just be limited to your room. You could study wherever you wanted to. But he made it sound like this was like a prison and you were being watched by prison guards 24/7 with these big binoculars. And as soon as you stepped out of line, there were heavy consequences leveraged on you. He talked about fear and guilt and shame being wielded as weapons. What do you think was being wielded at the MTC? Some of the things that I can think of: the BYU Creamery orange juice. That was wielded. That was just, it sounded like Civil War cannons going off every single night. I don't know what they put in that orange juice, but everyone knew to stay away from it.
It was a bioweapon. Yeah, for sure. It was experimentation. If you know, forget the indoctrination stuff. This is experimentation upon humans. That stuff is gnarly.
Yeah.
Why we kept drinking it, I don't know. Like everyone just kept like it was almost like a dare, you know, like, hey, can you survive the orange juice? Like, oh, I guess not.
The chocolate milk,
all
of the food that was wielded to the chagrin of my waistband. Like, I think I fatted out of like 2 pairs of pants at the MTC. What about you? What was being wielded in your experience?
I think the biggest fear I had was playing volleyball against the Samoan elders.
Oh.
That one, I did that once. And I was
Talk
like,
about fear, guilt, and shame. Yeah, there it is. We found it.
I don't know. I knew very little about Polynesian culture, but apparently the losing team sacrifices their life after that. You know, like it's a to the death thing with volleyball. So that was wielded against me. If you want to think of something that might put you in harm, like there's some competitive elders out there for sure.
I think of like the scripture markers with the flash camera to make lightsabers, or like the ironing boards that were bolted into the wall. Those were wielded to make really cool matrix photos, you know, like slow motion.
Oh, yeah, you remember those? The pull-up contests, the push-up contests, you know, there's not much recreation that happens, but I think that's intentional because you need to focus, right?
Yeah.
But like another huge benefit of it is that, like, yeah, you watch elders and they learn how to manage their own diet for once, or not manage it,
Yeah.
or they learn how to wash their own clothes for once. There's some like critical things that, people need to check on you first before you go out into the real world. Like, hey, can you do this? Can you do this basic thing, like wash your own clothes and not eat yourself to death? Because we need to be able to manage that.
Right.
And so
right.
like I feel like those are some like more temporal things that the Missionary Training Center trains you on that people don't realize. So
Yeah.
overall, I give it like a 9 out of 10 in terms of experience. I thought it was a great time.
What are some of the greatest things that you took away from the MTC? Some of the greatest lessons that you learned? I'll start off. So for me, I think it was figuring out how to plan my day effectively, because every day you had that little pocket planner and you were supposed to plan out everything that you're doing down to the hour. That is something that I still use to this day. The other thing is goal setting. Even though the goals didn't really make sense in the MTC, they were all kind of like fictional goals, it actually helped you get ready for the mission, because the mission is all about goals. Every single day you're setting goals in the mission, but that helps you after the mission to continue setting goals to improve your life. I think the third most valuable for me was just being held to a regular schedule. So the idea of this routine, and it was a self-imposed routine. In the MTC, there was a little bit more pressure to stay with the routine because you have so many other districts and you're living in close quarters, so everyone sees what you're doing. But on the mission, you really hold yourself to that routine. So they train it into you in the MTC, and then you are responsible for keeping it up on the mission. But that is something like, if you can keep up a basic routine, planning and goal setting, you're setting your future self up for a life of success, because there's nothing that can get in your way that you can't tackle at that point. But what about you?
100%.
What are some of the big lessons for you?
The most valuable thing I pulled from the MTC was the ability to just focus on a singular topic, like the gospel, and just dive deep. Before that, like, I would read my scriptures and it was regular, it was pretty surface level a lot of the time, like enough to build a testimony, but, or a resemblance of a testimony, but having the time to actually just focus for days, and weeks on this thing that I'm going to teach people and this thing that I believe, helped me develop a love for the gospel that I didn't have before.
Yeah.
Right. So having that time to just, like, without any distraction, which is such a benefit, such a plus. And that's funny that, a lot of people see that and they think isolation, but no, it's focus, it's solitude. It's extremely beneficial to just take that time and to focus on nothing else but the gospel. So that was the biggest thing that I took away from it.
Especially for us, because we were in this generation where smartphones weren't really a thing when we came out, but we did have phones. And so phones still were a big distraction for us. We were completely disconnected from those phones, and we had to learn how to focus on something at hand. I love that. Like, the ability to study, that's something that I took away from the MTC as well. I didn't know how to study in school. I was one of those kids that would do homework in front of the TV and think that I could do both really well, but it ended up just ruining both. Like, I wasn't enjoying the TV show and I did really poorly on my homework, but the MTC showed me, if you want to do something well, you need silence, you need to focus, and you need to study. And that was kind of an eye-opener for me. There's a study, it was done by Positive Psychology. It said, studies show that establishing a routine, engaging in training, setting goals, and planning can significantly benefit teenagers by improving their academic performance, boosting self-confidence, enhancing time management skills, promoting mental well-being, and developing resilience in the face of challenges. Wow. That's pretty much everything that the MTC encapsulates. And look at all of those benefits that come from it. And then you just contrast that with getting ready for the mission. So they're basically helping you boost your confidence, boost your self-esteem, give you these tools that you can use on a mission when you're going to go face some really hard things, so that you can have mental resilience. Because without those tools, you're going to be toast on your mission. Like, if I didn't have the MTC on my mission, culture shock would have been way, way worse, first of all. Because I did not study Spanish before my mission. I had no idea how to speak Spanish, so that would have taken me much, much longer to learn. But also, just the idea of the plan, the schedule, goal setting, teaching, all of that would have had to come by hard-learned experience. And the people that would have taught me those lessons would probably be much less forgiving than the very soft-spoken, gracious teachers at the MTC. There was this great Greek poet. I think his name is Archilochus. He says, "We don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training." And I think that really drives home the point of the MTC. It reminds me of, I'm reading a book called Band of Brothers, and fantastic book. It talks about this highly specialized group of volunteers. I think it was like one of the first paratrooping units in the United States military. And it shows how they had to enter boot camp, and their group, Easy Company, had the most difficult and challenging boot camp of anyone else in the Army. Like, they would have to run up and down this mountain called Currahee multiple times a day. And they had this rigorous training schedule. They had Captain Sobel, who was just like this manipulative, micromanaging guy who made sure he critiqued every aspect of their life. He made sure everything was clean, everything was orderly. And one time he fed them a bunch of spaghetti, and then he had them run up and down Currahee, which was 6 miles. And men were like puking the whole way out, And so the thing is, these men got used to physical exhaustion. They got used to being in freezing cold temperatures. They got used to being uncomfortable. And they became more familiar with their training than any other unit out there. So that their training became their default intuition. So that when they were in the chaos of battle, everything that they needed to do was second nature to them. They didn't have to think about it. They weren't frozen. They weren't scared. It was just like, okay, I've been through this before. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. That's what the MTC does for you. It starts that training, and it helps you learn. This is how to have like a basic conversation. You're trying to teach somebody. You're going on a cold contact. It gives you some training that you can fall back on so that it becomes second nature to you to teach and preach the gospel. As a final wrap up, there's this quote by Elder Holland that I really wanted to read. It says, "Missionary work is not easy because salvation is not a cheap experience. Salvation never was easy. We are the Church of Jesus Christ. This is the truth, and he is our great eternal head. How could we believe it would be easy for us when it was never easy for him?" So missionary work is going to be difficult. It reminds me of that song, like, "You're in the Army, Mr. Jones." That song, it's got some great one-liners, all right? I mean, this is the Army, Mr. Jones. No private rooms or telephones. You had your breakfast in bed before, but you won't have it there anymore.
Yeah.
Like, this guy, he thought he was signing up for the Hilton. It's like, no, you have to go through something difficult that tries you and gets you ready to face a very, very difficult experience, which is the mission, which then sets you up for an incredibly difficult experience, which is life.
Well, I think that just because it's hard, there's this like idea that difficult things or rigorous things are evil, right? I feel like there's the shadow term for that is high control. Like, no, they expect more of you, right? You have to do things on a higher level and with more discipline than you did before, but it's still up to you, right?
Yeah.
So I think that you can look at it and you can be bitter about it and say, I was caught in a high control, my freedom was restricted. These things were terrible that happened to me. Or you can look at it and say, I rose to a challenge. I tried something that was harder than I'd ever tried before, and it molded me into something better. I think that's what you need to take it. For missionaries who are going to the MTC, get ready. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be super fun. And you're going to learn how to catapult into your mission in a way that you couldn't if you didn't have the MTC. So I think it's overall a very positive experience as long as you take the right approach.
This guy's attitude is leading him down a path of entitlement. It's leading him down that comfortable path that says, like, if there is anything demanded or required or expected of me, that is in some way, shape, or form some kind of trauma or some kind of high control, and someone's trying to get one over on me. And it leads to a very whiny and entitled, very weak place. For that reason, we call him to consider the path of your feet. For parents out there, help your kids learn how to do hard things so that the MTC seems like a vacation for them.